felt, you feel claustrophobic. How can you just stay within a single space for
Yes.
months after months? It's really difficult. Yeah.
And did you stop your office working?
We did, yes. And I also had the virus, so that was also a really bad. Yeah, I had it in April, quite early, and so yeah, it was quite a depressing time for me, actually, locked in the house and then having this this virus which nobody knows anything about, and it was quite scary. Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Have you recovered completely?
I think so. Yeah, I think I have. Yeah, it took a while. It was rather slow, the recovery, but I think I'm quite fine now.
Well, you are still relatively young, so it's good. But if I catch it, not so good, I think.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say that. I mean, you are far more stronger than many of us. So
I doubt it.
right.
I think,
Maria,
should we start,
so nice
Mary?
to see you.
Yes, let's start.
Okay, we have 28 people joined with us, and it's more than 3 or 5, so we can start.
Mhm. People will keep joining, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I welcome you all. Good afternoon. Very welcome to you all. This is our second session. Yesterday we have seen the film on Richard Leplastrier, and today, this afternoon, he is with us. Good evening, Richard. It's 8 o'clock in Australia now. So thank you for joining us. Most of the people here know about you. Some of them met you, and we cherish that you have a architecture style, you have a lifestyle that is like a way of life you lead, and that's the resultant of your architecture practice. And as a Bangladeshi, we have is a rich cultural heritage and rich natural resources we have. It's a different part of the world, but you also come from another part of the world that's more with nature. And I think we'll have today a good conversation with you, your life, your style, and most of the people here in our group are younger people, and I know that they have got many questions, and I'm sure that will be an enriching for us to hear from you. Thank you, Richard. I ask Marina to take over and conduct the question answer session. Thank you very much.
Well, yes. First of all, Richard, thank you so much for agreeing to be with us today.
It's my pleasure.
Yes, so the thing is, we had this session yesterday, our evening time. We saw the film, and in my opinion, Anna did a fantastic job. I would really like to know what you think about that, but perhaps later. But I think what was interesting was, once we've seen the film, documentary or film, however you call it, after that there was a kind of a pause. Everybody became very thoughtful, kind of perhaps reflecting back on our own way of living and thinking and practicing architecture. So I think it would be really interesting. I'm sure there would be a lot of questions from the audience who were there yesterday watching the film online. So let's start with that. So so as I was asking you first, what was your reaction whether you've seen the film? If you have, what was your reaction? That's my first question I start with. Yeah.
It's quite difficult to answer that, actually, because I know only too well what was shown in the film. And it's very hard to have displacement about your life when you know it so well and you suddenly see it filmed. But I felt that Anna was very sensitive in the way that she portrayed I say our, I mean our family life, and the way we collectively live as a small family without too much fuss. And I got some laughs from it with the kids. It was, you know, that she took 15 years to make that film. So it was made over a long period of time, and we watched our kids in that film when they were young, and it was very nice to have a document from that point of view. But I think probably I think it was about life and not so much about objects or inverted commas works in architecture. It was more about the life or the seed that gets planted in the very beginning, that grows from an idea. And I think that is relevant to all architecture. And even though we live a very simple and relatively uncomplicated life, I think that attitude can apply to all works of architecture, in that it begins with life itself. And if it doesn't begin with that, what does it begin with? Is a difficult question to answer, I think. There's a lot of theories about things, and that doesn't mean very much to me, I'm afraid. But how to live appropriately and ethically, I think, is an important issue today for everybody. Although it's much harder in societies like yours, where things are really tough and you are living from hand to mouth in some cases, very hard life. And I really respect your continuing values in that. I don't know how long to talk for, Marina, but the life that we saw in that village where we stayed, in that beautiful series of houses that you made, was extraordinary for us. And we took away from that more than we put in, we felt. We took great lessons from that time spent with you down there. We didn't see that much of Dhaka, but we saw a lot of the way that village worked. And I wonder how you can start to reapply that to your cities in some way. I mean, it's a really difficult issue, isn't it? But you have a good climate.
Yes.
I mean, a warm climate anyway. Mm-hmm. So you're not faced with the cold like Europe is. So maybe it's possible to live even more simply in the garden somehow. I don't know. It's really difficult for me to say about that. But to get back to the film, I mean, how did you feel about it? Because you...
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I thought she did a really good job. I mean, as you mentioned that it was done over a period of time. So 15 years, I didn't know about that. But one can tell that it has been done over a long period of time.
Long time.
Yes. And well, I felt that she really was able to capture what is essentially Richard. And, you know, your life, your philosophy of your living, and the way you practice architecture, everything was so beautifully crafted in the overall film that it really, you know, the way I know you, I thought that it was very well put together. So really nice, yeah.
I have a friend here who's a very severe critic of things. And he told me that he thought it was a good sketch design. And I said, Sweating, it really wasn't a film about architecture. It was a film about living.
Right. Exactly.
Very funny.
Exactly. Yeah. Great. Well, so let's have a few. I know a lot of people have a lot of questions to ask you,
I'm
or
sure I
to
can't
have a
answer them, probably.
conversation. But yeah, so let's start. Who wants to go first? Maybe if people could show their hands, we could ask
I'll take the privilege to ask
the
the
first
first,
one. Okay.
or the second one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Richard. As I
Hi.
mentioned, I know you through my friend's eyes, and also through your work and also the film. So uh, I'm also working with, I'm a practicing architect. I have a practice, is an 30 years old. We get a quite sizable office, and we tell that we try to relate our climate, our value. But what you have just mentioned, that those houses, forms, those environment in Panigram could have been transformed into our new landscape, into our cities. But our cities actually followed the conventional modernity, modern cities that are nowadays being in question with big question in terms of the sustainability issues in the cities, livelihood of the people, and I mean, these cities are not inclusive. So what I see, I mean, since 2015, all the government, all the countries have tried to term cities with the SDG, Sustainable Development Goal. And I myself volunteering the work with UN Habitat, and I found that those systems are long way before existed in this world. Now they have been termed in a different way. And I found the way you are living your life, your architecture, I mean, it relates with I mean, eradication of poverty, affordable clean energy. These are all the responsible consumption of material, responsible use of public space, and also the climate action. Everything is included in your work. So how do you think, I mean, I find you are very I mean, uh, someone has to go to you, and we are very lucky that we are having a conversation with you today. But how do you send this message, because you have been practicing this, like, I think last 40 years, maybe since 80s, and this world is trying to recognize those last 4 or 5 years. So what should be your message to this world, that on the sustainability issues? I mean, these are being, you are already in practice. So I think I could make you understand what I'm trying to get from you.
Yes. Yes. You know, I think a great responsibility lies with us who come from more affluent cultures, because it's these cultures that are consuming most of the materials that the very simple cultures of the world, like I've traveled through Africa and right the way through the Middle East and India. I've traveled in a lot of places just with a simple small pack on my back and living very simply in that travel. And I found that the people in those cultures, one, have incredible kindness, and I think they have an extraordinary set of simple values that many of your cultures already know the answers to that. That it's the more affluent cultures that are using so much of the materials are and who are living so extravagantly, that I think that the message should be going to them, to us, and if there's any value in the way that um, my family and our other architect friends are working and thinking, then it's actually to our own cultures that those messages should be given. I think that you already half know the answers where you are, and how you go about making the cities more equable, more fair, more just to your people who are less privileged is a great question, and that's almost a political social question. And but I think that that village we visited had very good alternate power on their bicycles. They had very simple ways of lighting their buildings. They had very simple ways of making the buildings. They were beautiful, and they were very impressive to us. So I think that if anything comes from the values that we are holding here in our very small way, it's more directed to our politicians and our wealthy people who I think are not taking the issues on. Our country in particular is very poor with climate issues. And it's because we are controlled by the big monies and the mining companies. Although that's changing, I think now. We're working quite hard at that. Most of the ordinary people here are against the mining. And it's the carbon in the air that's the problem. And our eldest son is a scientist, a marine scientist. And I asked him about the barrier reef. He said, yes, Papa. He said, there are lots of problems with it, but he pointed and he said, the problem is up there. He said, you know, the carbon dioxide is the problem. And that's a worldwide problem. So we as a culture here can't say to our population who are concerned about it that, oh, it's okay, we are shipping the coal out somewhere else. I mean, what sort of an answer is that? Because it all goes up into the sky in the end. So we are really shirking the problem here. And I don't know about the United States and other places. I know that Europe is much better balanced, especially Scandinavia. But the cultures that I saw in Africa, right the way through the Sahara, down through sub-Sahara, right into Nigeria, they are brilliant, you know, and I think that, and we call them third world countries. That is a joke. They are, in many ways, in terms of value, first world countries. They are brilliant in the way that they do things. So I certainly don't feel that the values that we have in our small collective here are that important for you there, but more important for us. Does that make any sense to you or not? We're the ones who are using all the energy.
Yeah.
100 times more than simple cultures. What do you think about that?
আপনি মিউট করা তিতাস ভাই muted.
Yeah, I mean, this is an obviously with the cultural issue, and I think it's as you mentioned, the Africa. I mean, modernity has failed in Africa actually. All the modern theories of economy and also governance and the conventional way has to be reshaped, reviewed, and it's a failure, I think. And we should come up with, as you mentioned, and has to be linked with the politics of the people's livelihoodness. How we are going to feel it. I mean, globalization is a big failure. I mean, we can't think of like make one world. There is no one world. One world in terms of, as you mentioned, in terms of carbon emission, there is one world. But in terms of people, culture, that has to be different ways, different place. Place is very important. As you also believe in that, that every place has got its value, and that has to be make the difference. And the world is one globe. Is obviously our climate, our culture is different, people are different, food is different, our heritage is different, but people's mind, we everybody love, everybody's I mean has got sorrow, everybody has got pain. So that is the value, as you mentioned, that the politician has to understand. Don't make all the cities look alike. I mean, every city has got that value, and that has to be put forward and has to be nourished. That's I understand that.
Okay, Jumu bhai.
Hi, Richard. This is Nurur over here. It was such a pleasure to see your film last night. Couple of questions. I'm a practicing architect and also educator, so I'll come from a different angle. We saw this Richard. Richard connected wonderfully to the to nature and to the world. Is there a Richard that can connect with the city, or has? Yes. And if so, if Richard has not given up on the city, what would be Richard's message for the cities?
Well, I haven't given up on the city. And I think if the film lacked anything, it lacked showing what work had been done by my friends and I for the city. We have been working for 15 to 20 years to get all the industrial sites on Sydney Harbour turned into small port towns using all the old buildings and getting the ferry systems all regenerated, but nothing about that came through.
Yes.
And I'm sorry? I'm sorry I missed that. I'm sorry.
It's okay, Richard, carry on. There was somebody's mic was open at that time.
Okay. But you know, the cities are amazing, amazing places. Like cities, I think, are about connections, with nexus, the crossing of things it means. So connections are what the city is actually about. And my old wonderful landscape teacher, Lloyd Rees, said an interesting thing. He said, what else is a city if it's not a collection of beautiful buildings? And we had a long discussion about that. What if it's not a gallery of beautiful buildings, is the way he put it. And then in thinking and discussing that with him afterwards, I think the word gallery is the key word, because it is the connection between places in the city that makes for its life and its vitality. And of course the buildings should be wonderful and beautiful, but more often than not then they aren't. But some of them are. But one can make the connections between places so that the people, when they move through the city, are moving in a really beautiful and pleasant way. There's a wonderful essay written by Utzon about that. And he said, people in the city are like the leaves in a stream that come down with the flowing water, and they go past a rock and they turn around and they linger there for a little bit, and then the water picks them up and washes them on to the next place. And then they linger and then they move on. He said, that's the way the city works. And I think that that's a very beautiful way of looking at it. And I personally don't think people should live in anything more than 6 to 8 stories maximum, because I think from the street and from the 6th or 8th story, you should be able to see almost the color of somebody's eyes down there on the street, or to be able to say to your friend that you'll be down in 10 minutes and you're sorry to be running late, or to the person who's about to steal your bicycle and you can say, please leave my bicycle alone. Like, you know, I think that that connection between the buildings and the life in the buildings and the street is the most important thing. And tower buildings don't work that way. They also make people feel sick because they move slightly. And I'm so much against buildings that are over 8 stories. And I can't believe that with buildings of 6 to 8 stories and with gardens in between and connections between the rooftops of those buildings, you can make a life that exists on a whole series of different levels, up to 8 floors. And the big buildings that we have built, maybe we should take some of the middle floors out and make gardens in them and somehow rehumanize them in a certain way. And I can't stand buildings whose walls don't open. I mean, what are we thinking about? People say, oh, you know, the wind blows high up there and when it rains, they'll leak. But you say to those people, what you do is you design the buildings to leak. You take the water that comes in and you do something with it. Like I know about boats, and there are certain designers of boats that make portholes that leak, have their own gutters inside of them. They're brilliant. We just have to be a bit more clever in the way that we think about things. And at the heart of it all is the human condition, always. So the cities are wonderful places, particularly the really good ones. And one celebrates them. I think of cities like Kyoto in Japan. I think of cities like Tokyo and Osaka. They are absolutely so lively with good food and life and mixing of people. Sure, they have difficulties. And then, you know, I think I look at our cities here and I think how dull and ordinary they are.
Just another thing, as you brought up Udzon, is that in the film it spoke about your connection with Udzon and how you were on the terrace of the Sydney Opera House, and you spoke about how he had placed it so it overlooks the city in a particular way. I'd like to, you know, like you correctly said, the film did not, you know, show a lot of your works, which kind of would talk more about you. So I want to bring up one particular work, which is the George's Head Lookout. Now that
Yes.
project is, what I felt is that connection, you know, in a way you remembering Udzon in a particular way. Now, would you please tell me a little bit about that?
Well, you know, my friend Rod Simpson and I, as I said, worked on the issues of Sydney Harbour for a long time. And we met with the politicians and we showed them images, and we had a big exhibition in the city. We built the whole of Sydney Harbour in the exhibition room in plywood, so that all the points of land that we dealt with were there. People were walking in the water, so to speak, on the floor, of course, but they were walking in the bays and in big scale in this long gallery. And then on the walls were all the ideas for the points of land and the industrial sites and how we could translate them into lively areas. Well, you know, this went on for a long time, and we had 2 meetings with the planning minister, and out of 48 industrial sites, which were brilliant in their own way because they were in the deep water ends of the points of land for industry, because it was all done by ship. Out of 48 industrial sites, which we wanted to save and turn into these village ports, we have saved 4. Maybe that's the story of the city. But then the people who were dealing with the military lands in Sydney Harbour contacted Rod and I and said, come and work with us, because these lands of the military are going to be returned to the people. And they were. It's one of the great victories of our city. And that is one of the points of land where the George's Head lookout is, the big circle.
Yes.
But the indigenous people were there a long time before us, like 60,000 years before us. They know this country very well. They used to meet on that point of land. They used to meet on that point of land. And I've lost my friend somehow. Are you still there? Yes, here we
Yes,
are.
I'm here. I'm here. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. And so we made the lookout as a big circle because that was always their way of meeting. And we made it in an old gun emplacement where we colonists built these gun emplacements because we were frightened of the Russians coming. Crazy stuff. We never fired a shot in anger, right? But we have translated that from something from warlike to peace-like. And we transferred a lot of those military sites from war to peace. And that is one of them.
Right. My last question to you, Richard, would be from an academic point of view, is that the so-called modern academic curricula that we have in most universities teaching architecture, and which is almost replicated in most places. If there were two things that you'd object against it, what would be the two things that you'd ask us teachers to be careful about when we look at our education system?
Well, you know, I'm like you. I've always practiced and I have always taught. I think the two things go hand in hand. I'll move this a bit further away, I think. I think it's like two hands together, education and practice. Architecture is a practicing art, as you well know. And so my friends and I, like Pete Stutchbury and me, we have taught for now 1 day a week for 40 years, long time. And we taught at Newcastle University. We worked with the final year students there always, and we'd be there for 1 day a week entirely for them. We'd sit upstairs and they could come and talk with us about anything they chose, whether it was a family issue or whether it was to do with the nature of a library, right? And of course, as you would only well understand, teaching goes both ways. You know, we have the privilege of being working with young, creative minds, and they are so fantastic. So always, you know, you take as much as you give. That's the way it works. So in terms of education, what happened at Newcastle University is there were 6 practicing architects there. Pete Stutchbury, me, 2 others, plus 2 others. There were 6 of us, all were gold medalists in this country. And they fired us all.
Hey, good.
Yeah, fantastic. We had one professorship's money and we cut it into 6 pieces and we took 1/6 each for our time, which was enough to pay our rent and things like that. But they had 6 professors for the cost of 1 and they fired the lot of them. Fantastic. So I'm deeply disturbed about the role of architecture in universities. And I don't think it can be taught online. And I think universities will now take this pandemic as an excuse for doing a lot of their teaching online. And they will save money by doing that, by getting perhaps you to make a beautiful lecture which they'll then show 10 times over a decade. And they won't, you know, like they'll use it because universities have turned from cooperations into corporations. And the vice chancellors now have a big fat cigar and sunglasses and a big apartment and a flash car, and they are not thinking about the students at all. So I'm deeply disturbed for the universities, and I think in architecture the students should start their own schools, and they would get all of us, you, Marina, me, and Stutch and others, to be teaching and working in that situation, as well as them working on practical problems at the same time. So if you go to history and you go to the AA school in London, 100 years ago, that was started. And it wasn't started by architects, it was started by the students.
Right, yes.
How about that? And I'm thinking that's what should happen now. And if they took that step, we would absolutely be behind them.
Right.
Who knows? What do you think?
Yes.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you for for your wonderful thoughts on both the city and on education. And I'm glad I could have this conversation with you.
I totally agree with you that we should start, the students should start a school and we should follow.
Absolutely. And then Marina, we can all go and teach in different places and
absolutely,
and be part of a great creative process. Leave these money makers behind.
Absolutely, yeah.
Definitely.
Okay, I think Farhad had something of a comment, not a question, so he requested to be heard.
Thank you, Mernappa.
Hello, how are you?
Richard.
You have wonderful eyes.
I'm very grateful to you. I was a participant at Panigram at your master class program. I would like to have an advice from you on certain aspect of my work or thought. I can draw by hand, and I used to do that regularly in different kind of occasions. But I, viewing the cinema last night, I realized that there is a gap in me with considering yourself. I think that is craft. I think that you are a obviously you draw very well, and I think you are also a master craftsman in my consideration. But the problem is for myself, I don't have any engagement with any craft work. But I'm realizing that as a practicing architect or as an architect, if I would have any engagement with any kind of craft work like carpentry or metal work or anything, it would have reinforced my understanding and clear my understanding. Now, I'm asking you that, can you give me any advice on this? I have already passed, I guess, more than half of my life.
You're still young then. We are half each other's age. It's very nice. But do you know, have you heard of a great Danish architect called Per Jensen Klint?
No, sorry, I don't.
Klint, K-L-I-N-T. And his son was Cor Klint, K-A-A-R-E, Cor Klint. Now, Per Jensen Klint was an architect back in the 1890s, 1900s, 1910s, 1920s. And his son Cor was born and became an architect and designer, great influence on Utzon. But you know, Per Jensen Klint made a building called the Grundtvig Church. Grundtvig, G-R-U-N-D-V-I-G, Grundtvig Church in Copenhagen. It is absolutely magnificent. And he controlled the laying of every brick, and his bricklayers built the whole building. And Per Jensen Klint finally died, and the building was not finished. And his son finished the building with the same team of bricklayers. Per Jensen Klint changed the whole direction of Danish architecture and furniture making by changing the course of education so that every person who graduated as an architect also graduated with a trade, be it carpenter, cutting things with beautiful tools, handmade tools, sharp as razors, the making of ceramics, pots like this beautiful handmade pot of a friend's gift to us, which fits the hand and the mouth and makes the tea taste that much better. So every Danish architect graduated not only with a degree in architecture, but with a craft. And even if it was a small craft like ceramics, each of them knew the process of making something. It's a verb, making something, as is architecture is housing. Housing is a verb, not a noun. Living, it's all about ing, you know, that's, and each student graduated with that understanding. So I don't think it matters if you are learning to make just small things, as long as you are concerned about the making of it. And in the making, before the making is the drawing. And the drawing can be done in a good 6B pencil. It can be done in charcoal, beautiful charcoal, the best drawing material of all. It draws by itself, you know, you put it on the paper and you can will it to move. It's fantastic. And it's been on the walls of caves forever. So there's no reason why you can't start the drawing again now and keep on doing that. The best Aboriginal artist in this country, a woman called Emily Nanganwari, she started painting when she was 75.
Oh.
And she finished up when she was 85, but she made the best paintings of all. So it's not about age. It's about, I think, intent. And I think it's about love. Our old drawing teacher, Lloyd Rees, the same man who said the gallery of beautiful buildings, he taught us to draw for 5 years at university. And he didn't teach us to draw in the classical way. He taught us to love to draw. And then we did the rest. So my advice would be to keep it going. And start the making. That can start anytime. And you know, timber or wood is such a beautiful material. It doesn't take the body heat away. It's always warm to the touch. Steel is interesting stuff, but it rusts and it takes the body heat away. But timber, you can make things with the smallest of tools, like this knife, right?
Mhm.
Made by a man 16 generations in Japan, who was a tool maker for family was 16 generations. Like. So my advice to you would be to just take it up again and do it and love it. And that's the other thing, isn't it? That when you're ready. Oh, thanks, darling. Our eldest son has bought me dinner.
Oh, oh goodness.
But that's okay. It can wait.
Okay, enjoy your dinner. We can keep talking if you
Oh,
you
no,
can.
no, I would never dream of talking to you with a mouthful of food, but it can wait. So, but the other thing that follows on from that conversation, which I really appreciate your lovely honesty and passion, actually, that's what's determined it, is the issue of beauty. And, you know, like as architects, I don't think we can help ourselves, that we are actually driven by that in the same way that sculptors are and painters are. We can't help ourselves. There's a whole lot of social issues. It's a great social art, architecture, but at the same time, there's the issue of, is it beautiful as well as all these other things?
Right.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next, Fawad Haider, if you can ask, and then after that, Naim Ahmed Kibriya.
Hello, Richard. Very nice
Hello,
to hear from you. Very nice to hear from you.
And
Well,
see your
I'm
in the background.
I'm architect Fawad Haider, a small practitioner in Dhaka. Well, I have not heard much about you before, but it's an opportunity which Marina gave it to us to get to know you a little bit. I enjoyed the movie last night. It was really enjoyable. And I got really interested about you. And later on, I watched a few videos in Google, YouTube. So know a little bit about you. I had a question I would like to ask you. By seeing the film, I thought you enjoy life and that is reflected in your houses. I saw extreme simplicity and sensitivity in your works. What I understand by viewing the film is that you celebrate life. My question is, what would you suggest us as architects to deal with each project, big or small? I mean, how do you approach a design of a project? How would you like to approach?
It's of course it's a beautiful question, and I think we all have our different way of operating, perhaps. But for me, I spent time in the place, even if it's the city. You know, like a house that we made on the edges of the city, which was quite a dense place. You know, like I camped there and I lived in that building while it was being done with my drawing board in the middle of winter. And and somehow or other, the place really tells you a lot if you look under the surface of it. And even in the city, you know, cities are made in places because of what that place was originally. Like it'd be very interesting to go and just study, excuse me, Dhaka and the meaning of the word. Where did it come from? And was it an intersection of waterways or crossing points of waterways that began Dhaka right in the very beginning? And sometimes in cities you can see that there are building places there that if you understand what's underneath them, you are in a good position to make changes around them. It's like trying to working in the city with existing fabric is like trying to have a beautiful carpet made in Afghanistan. And over time, it has worn out some patches in it. And you are trying to repair them. Then for you to repair that carpet in a way that celebrates how it began, you have to understand the weft and the woof and how it began. And then once you've understood that, then you can make changes to that carpet that will, that carpet, tapis, carpet like a rug, a rug. Then you can make changes to it that make it better than it was before. So spending time in the place is a really important thing for me to do. And over time, you can go to a place and you can pick it up much more easily than when you were young. You develop an intuition about things. So spend time in the place. Try and peel back all the layers that were underneath in that place to begin with. If it's outside of the city, which way does the water run off that side? Which way does the sun come in there? Which way are there animals still besides us, still living in there? What is the ethos of the place? What is the circumstance of the place? If we can understand that, then we can make things that fit within it and make the place better than it was before, not worse. Now, if you look at the work that we've done in this country since colonization, we have destroyed a lot of the most brilliant country, like a giant garden in perfect balance. Big responsibility. I personally don't know what we can ever do about that. But the indigenous people understand that very well, and our politicians don't.
Yeah.
So does that go some way towards answering that question? Start with the place.
Thanks a lot.
I think.
Yeah.
Not with the object. Start with the subject.
Yeah.
How you feel about a place. How does it affect you? How does it affect other people? All of those things can help to make your first marks and that first beautiful incremental drawing that maybe expresses exactly what it is that you want to do.
Yeah.
And then you have the issue of not losing that. That's always easy to do too.
Right.
Thank you.
Naeem.
Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Hi, Richard. I am Naeem.
Hi, Elaine. I know I've met you, have I not?
Yeah. We met many times. I did 2 master classes, one in 2009 in GMC Glen Master Class, Glen Market Master Class in 2009,
Nice to see you.
and in 2011 I did my second master class in Glencree in Ireland, where Ioanni Palasa was also there, and you were also there.
We
Lindsay's
were.
homeland, yeah. And when
Yes.
you visited our country, I met you there in Dhaka
Yes.
in your lecture, third time. So
Yeah,
how are you,
that's
and
why
how is everything there?
everything's fine here, and it's very nice to see you again.
Okay, thank you so much. So we enjoyed your film yesterday. That was fantastic, and I hope that many of us, especially who met you physically, have a lot more to say about you. you always talked about drawing, to draw something in and to deliver, by farmhand with soft pencil, with soft revolution on the papers. So drawing has always been an important, media for you. So
And for you.
I don't have. This is not a question. This is some type of trying to know from you that I'm an observer and something I'm observing, and I'm trying to draw it. So there always remains a big gap between the observer and the thing that is being observed. How can this gap can be minimized, and how drawing can, make one understand about uh, understanding the whole place? That's one question.
Oh, it's a lovely question, isn't it? And I've got a quote here in my sketchbook about drawing, written by a great writer who was a potter, actually. And he started off being Bulgarian Jewish and then went to England, and his family were grain merchants across Europe for 3 and 4 centuries. But he now is a ceramicist and a potter. But he has a good. Oh, I'll have to clean my glasses. It's very humid here tonight, and they're fogging up. So bear with me for just a split second.
Sure.
They're very good, these glasses, because you can't break them because they're already broken.
And you can't lost it also, because it always hangs on your shoulder, on your neck.
Yeah, Len, listen to this. Edward Deval is his name, and he's talking about drawing. And he says, a great drawing celebrates the moment of apprehension and the fugitive moment of response. A great drawing celebrates the moment of apprehension and the fugitive moment of response. It's a beautiful description, is it not? And
yes, it is.
It raises the issue that a good drawing happens right from the heart, in a way. It's not. Other great drawings can be the connection of the mind to the hand, but what he's talking about is that calligraphic response to a moment in time, and you respond, whether it's with a fine pen or whether it's with your charcoal, and once you've responded, you never touch it again. That's what I find, because it's that magical moment. So, and then the drawing can be something that is much more studied, and it puts in all the veins of the leaf of the tree. And it's an absolute study of the reticulation of the moisture through the tree. That's very different from what Edward Deval was talking about. And then there's the architectural drawing, which shows the way the building comes into being and how you make it. And that's another sort of a drawing. And then once the building is finished, then that is the only moment a real final architectural drawing can be done, at the end of the job, when it's finished. Because if it's a live work, then it's changing all the time. And this has problems. We all know that, costs go up, blah, blah, blah. But really, the real drawing of the final work is at the end. So drawing means to pull from, doesn't it? Drawing. You draw a conclusion, for example. or you draw water from the well, or you take a landscape and you pull from that something that you want to say about it. It moves you. What a wonderful art that is. And, you know, I think the computers are brilliant for many things, but I don't think they can draw like charcoal. And but, you know, I'm old fashioned in that respect. So I've got lots to learn. Mm.
Well, thank you. Another question. Particularly, it's my personal question. I never thought to be an architect. I never dreamed to be an architect.
No,
I always wanted to be a sculptor from my childhood, but
yes.
my family, you know, somehow drove me my interest to architecture. So one of my favorite philosopher, Confucius, is from China. Uh, one of my favorite quotes from him is, "If you love the things you do, then you will never have to do anything in your life." So
You'll never
I'm an
have
architect, never have to do anything in your life. If you love the things you do, you will never have to do anything in your life.
except the things you love.
I'm an architect by chance. So still, when I design or I think about architecture, I practice in my thinking. Sometimes it gives me a trouble. I mean, uh, and sometimes it gives me pain, a lot of pain. And I don't know. I don't know about you whether you wanted to be an architect from your childhood. That I don't know. But can you suggest how can this dilemma or this trouble or this type of, you know, frustration can be erased or can be eradicated?
That's a really difficult question, Lan. You see, perhaps that's why I've always chosen to work in a very, very small way. You know, when you start to do really big works, then the complication is exponential, and also you have to have somebody that you are dealing with in a big work who is simpatico with your heart. If it's a cold committee that do not understand anything, that's a very, very difficult issue to come to grips with. And I'd love to know how Khan managed to do that so well. I mean, Utzon didn't. He couldn't. He couldn't control the politicians. And I've just been working on a very big, important building for a herbarium for the plants of this country, a fantastic thing. And we had a wonderful scheme, but we weren't running the job. The project managers were running the job, and they didn't understand anything about architecture. And the builders who were second in command to the project managers are only interested in the profit margins. So we are third or fourth down the line. When we come to improve the design, which you are always doing in architecture, you never stop. You always are changing it and making it better. They didn't understand at all. And so we just left the job. So it's hard when it's on that sort of level. I haven't got any answers for you. But if it's on a smaller level, then it's important that the people with whom you are working, who have dreams, because you're custodian of their dreams. That's our responsibility. Then, and the people who are doing the work, they are usually wonderful, I find. They have a great sensibility. You'll get on well with them. So it's important to work on smaller things, I think, if you have that sort of heart. And I think it's important to make sure that you have a good overlap of sensibilities with the people with whom you are working.
Well, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Richard.
Nice to see you again, Len. We see you out here again, I hope, or
Yeah.
in Dhaka.
Somewhere.
Okay.
I hope so. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I have two other people at the moment. So there is Riyadh and Jose. Maybe we can start with Jose and then go to Riyadh, and let's just keep to one question each. Otherwise, we have too many people and we won't be able to listen to everyone. So yeah, Jose, please.
Hi, hi, Richard. I am Jose Luis Cortez. I am from Mexico, and I like very much to be here talking with you. I would like to ask you, when you approach a family that wants to make a house, small house, how is the process of design that you follow? Do you begin analyzing the family first, or you prefer to look to the site and see the site? Do you want to know the program, or you want to know the characteristics of the place where they want to build the house?
Yes. Well, you know, I think it's all of those things, isn't it? And
yes,
quite often I have camped on the land of the clients with the people for a week or 2 weeks, and that's always a very good thing to do, because then you see how the place works, and you can point it out to them, because their sensibilities and our sensibilities are different, or not necessarily different, but more finely tuned in our case quite often. Sometimes the clients are brilliant. But so I think it's really important to spend time with them. But this is when it's an exclusive situation, like you're making a house for somebody one-off, right? Now, if it's a question of making housing for people who have very little money, and who then it's a completely different story. I'm always deeply moved by Doshi and his work from Ahmedabad about that, where he just put in the services for them and the materials and very little else, and let them somehow or other, with their own ingenuity and need, carry out the work. I mean, that's an interesting way of looking at it, right? That's when things are for people who really don't have very much at all. I spend a lot of time with people and let the brief for the place become of its own accord. You know, some people say, well, I want 3 bathrooms and I want room for 3 garages for my cars, and think, well, I have to say to them, I'm really sorry, but I'm just not interested in making a place like that, right? But I know someone who can, and I'll introduce them to somebody who can look after them in the way they want to live, right? But I think it's important that you have that overlap with the people, and I think it's important that the response to the place develops over time, and it can develop through rough models on the site. If you camp on the site with the people, then you can make a rough model out of earth and leaves, and it doesn't matter how you do it, but it gets them to start to think about it, and then take them to a whole lot of places. They may not be your places. They may be much better than the ones that one has done oneself, but you show them places which are different to what they've ever thought of before. I think that's important too. So, and then I think back on it all, because now I've made maybe 30 different places over 45 years of practice, maybe more than that actually. And they're all different, because the needs are different. And I think some are better than others, but you do your best always. I think you develop the brief as you go. That's what I think. What do you think that? How about you?
Totally, Richard, I totally agree with you. I think you have to get involved with the people, very much involved, and to see what are their characteristics and the budgets. When you are talking with the people that have very little money, I think you have very high responsibility, you know, to administrate that small money in a good way. And sometimes they mistake the location. And it's good what you said, to help them to find a good location. Because if it's a bad location, they perhaps it will cost the double, you know, and you have to advise them and say, take care, don't build there because it's not convenient for you, you know, and that's an important issue of the architect, not just to lead, you know, to advise your client in relation with the best site that they can where they can spend their money. No, I totally agree with you, Richard. Have you been in Mexico? No.
Oh, I'd love to go to Mexico. I've always been such an admirer of your culture.
Yes.
And I've been watching your relationship with the United States, thinking, how can you manage to live next to a neighbor like that?
Well, you're very welcome to come. You're very welcome to come.
Right, absolutely, yeah.
Everybody. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Great pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you, Jose. Riyadh Bhai and then Imran.
Hello, Richard. I'm Riyadh. I'm from Dhaka, and we met in 2005, I guess, or six. I think it's 2006 in GMC, Glen Market Masterclass.
Yeah, that's a long time back now.
Yeah. It's probably when the filming started, because one of the mud houses. You're talking about the mud house, and you also took us to another mud house, that mud walls, but not quite this one, but you were talking about it. So I'll just go to the film directly and point out to one and take a thread from there. You once said in the film that it's about not calculated calculations, but more like approximate calculations, like when we are
not about calculations, about
I said not perfect calculations, like working calculations. It's about that. I'm saying that since in architecture that this gut feeling or sniff, or just about thinking about it, not really going into precise calculation. Sometimes it is what designers do a lot, but and I value it a lot, because this sniffing has a lot to do with to come up with schemes, wonderful schemes. But increasingly, the way the knowledge world of architecture is growing, there is a kind of a divide that, and from one point of view, these sort of things are seen as a kind of very naive and elementary works, which we can people are not really paying a lot of attention to it. And when a young mind comes, and then he can be really distracted, and he may not really value it. Do you know what I mean? So
I do.
Yeah. So
I do.
So
yeah. And
can you really elaborate on that from your point of view a bit?
Well, yeah, it's an interesting question. You know, I have a very good friend with whom I work who's an engineer, and he's a brilliant man, and he is a very creative man. He has a great sense for structure, and in the end, in working with him, he does do calculations, but I found that a lot of the time it's not necessary, because we have an affinity together, the two of us, very strong. But in my own case, which is a very simple case, really, I've always been involved since I was a young child, aged 9, 10, 11. I've been involved in boats and making things. And when you are involved in boats, which are not boats for just sitting in for pleasure, but boats for racing, which have to be pared back as much as possible, because you want it to be light, because the wind pushes you along more easily if it's light rather than heavy. One great yacht designer said, weight is only ever good in a steamroller. Steamroller is the thing that compresses the earth on the roads, right? And over time, you get to understand about how much something can take bending, how much the branch on a tree, what size it is, where it starts and where it tapers, and one breaks and you look at it and you say, it wasn't strong enough in the end. You make something for the boat and it breaks. So you remake it just a little bit stronger, right? You don't start with a calculation that protects your backside against the authorities, because then it'll be over-designed. And a lot of engineers are working that way. But my friend Max doesn't work that way. He puts his backside on the line, right? And I think that you get a sense of proportion through one, making things, and you learn how the material works and the difference in different materials, and two, you just develop a sense of proportion. And proportion is such an important word in architecture. It's to do with what is fitting and right in terms of dimensions and scale and relationship to the human being and all of those things. And usually we as architects have a pretty good sense of proportion, I find. But the more you draw and the more you make things and the more you get involved in the building process, the better that sense of proportion becomes. And I think that's important for the architect. The calculations can always come later. Now, if you pick up the skeleton of a bird that's washed up on the seashore, and you pick it up and it's lost all its feathers and it only has its carcass and its chest bone, which is like the keel of a boat actually, and you see how things are joined in that, the structure of a bird, and our structure for that matter, is not a fixed rigid structure like engineers normally design, but it's flexible and connected by gristle and is like a big basket and can take a lot of beating, and the bird takes great stresses from its flying and pulling out of a dive. It's a flexible structure. Each part contributes to the next. And I think as architects, it's really important to understand that. Okay? Yeah. It's not a fixed thing of calculation. It's an intuition developed over time through a sense of proportion and a study of nature and the natural world.
Yeah, I was emphasizing on that, because now you talk about intuition, you talk about geometries, you talk about proportions. They often seem to be dated, but in my mind, I think, how can these words be dated even after thousands of years? I think they will be as relevant as they were like thousands of years before. So it's,
yes.
But I think sometimes the structured study in the university level or something, it has to do perform in such a way that it has to undermine this sort of natural things which are very, very important, and that can give, sometimes it sends a wrong message in the air and people can be distracted. So that's why I wanted to know from you.
Yes, and I think one has to be careful that you don't imitate nature.
Yeah, I understand. It's not, understand the working principle of it, yeah.
From principles, and then translate that, and then it gets abstracted and becomes something that's architectural.
Yeah.
But it's not like all sinewy curves. It just works in a sensible, logical way.
Yeah. Okay, and it was nice talking to you, Richard.
Lovely. Nice to see you.
One question.
One question, yeah.
My question's over. Thank you.
Okay. Imran, well, we want Richard to go back to his dinner. We don't want him to go hungry. So we should. So yeah, Imran.
Yeah. Hello, Richard. Can you hear me?
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, hi. It is a pleasure meeting you, and I'm sure you hear this a lot, how inspirational you can be, especially when we watched the movie yesterday. And I'm not gonna repeat that because it's you're truly an inspirational figure. So I usually follow this scientist, and he's an astrophysicist, and he once said, like, there are like about 6,000 astrophysicists in this world, and there are like about 6 billion people. So if you divide, you can encounter, or you can have the opportunity to meet one astrophysicist out of a million people. So I think this is one of those rare moments for me to meet you here, and I have like so many questions, but because of the time limitation, I'll narrow it down. The first is, these are not questions, basically. These are like, first of all, I'd like to request you to elaborate. In one segment of the movie, you were saying like a relentless pursuit of purpose. And I found that really, really deep and intriguing. And one architect I should mention, I was reading one of his texts, like Richard's, is the Stanley Sato. He's a South African architect. He practices in the West Coast of the United States. And he once said, like, understanding involves purpose, and purpose involves reason. Reason involves creation. Cause, and then cause involves creation. Creation involves, creation involves, what is that? Familiarity, and also like relatedness to power among us. So I would like to elaborate. I would like to request you to elaborate on that. Your understanding of that purpose. I mean, how do you define what are the aspects that you mentioned, or you meant by saying the purpose? Is the existential purpose, or like any other purpose?
Yeah, the line actually came from my old teacher in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
He was the one who said that. Unfortunately, we can't ask him about it any longer because he's finished up. But he said he talked about the relentless pursuit of pure purpose. Like just focusing down until you got it absolutely right. Now, it depends what it is that you're talking about. So, but if you look at tools, for example, that you use for woodwork and other things, they're usually made over a long period of time, and slowly but surely, anything that doesn't work with them gets eroded away or taken away, and you are left with a tool that works in the hand, and it works, but it works beautifully. Right? And I think that architecture is like that. I think that it should work brilliantly, but it should work beautifully. So in other words, where your hand hits the edge of the table, then this is the profile of the table, because when you lean against it, suddenly it fits your hand, and it belongs in there, right? And I think that's the sort of thing that he was talking about. He was talking about the beautiful instruments that they whip the tea, which are made of bamboo. And that was his. But then you have other purpose, which also has an aesthetic side to it. So if you take war equipment, unfortunately, for its savage, unhuman purpose, you can't help looking at some of those fighter planes and saying, my heavens, what an extraordinary bit of equipment it is. Like there's nothing that's gone to waste. The unfortunate thing is the purpose is the wrong purpose, right? So, but even then they are an example of the pursuit of pure purpose. And that's what he was talking about. And that's what, I've learned from him, but you can't always get it right. But I mean, look, it's interesting. Like here on my table is, can you see this? This is a weight. It's a lead weight. It's very heavy. Now I had 12 of these. I made them in the fireplace in a proper mold with a casting thing. And they're made to sit on a drawing with a bent batten to hold the batten in place in this curve, and then you draw around it. But it's smart because it's got the most weight where you need it, where it lands on the batten, and the least weight on this end so you can hold it, right? And it tapers as well. It's a nice thing. Right? It's got leather on it here, so as you don't get the lead on your hands. So when you're moving it, you can put it on without, then you don't smudge your beautiful pencil drawing with the lead from the weight. And if you look here, there's lots of other things, you know, like, you know, it happens all the time, doesn't it? Here's the key to my old car, which is a beautiful old car. Pure purpose again, and fantastic. Like, I think architecture belongs there, but at the same time, it has memories and it's social art, and it might become the manifestation of the dreams of a family, and it might stay with the family for 4 generations. What does that give it that's somehow outside the issue of pure purpose? It's something about life is reported in it and through it, and cities are the same. I'm not sure that there's a definite answer to that issue.
No, it's okay. I understand. But I just wanted a sort of elaboration on that.
Well, it's a very nice thing to think about, isn't it?
Yeah,
and I'll think about it a lot more tonight after talking with you about it.
Absolutely. And Marnapa, if you allow me to ask a little bit, I'd like to ask 2 more questions. Is it okay?
2 more, okay.
Yeah. Just so, Richard, the thing is, I'm sure you. I mean, I must say, I'm sure that you record all of your, you know, how you evolve from your first project to the last project. Do you record all those evolutions that you went through or you exercised? And can you give us a little bit of a kind of example where you actually went through like an initial stage of an idea and you refined it, whether it can be a sort of detail, or it can be planning principle, or it can be of any sort. Like, so I'm just curious to know how you evolve. I mean, you are what we are seeing, what Richard we are seeing right now is a crystallized form of Richard. So I'm curious to know more about.
It's a really interesting. It's an interesting question, actually, isn't it? Because you start when you're young,
yeah,
and you start when you have not so much experience.
Yes,
and it was Utzon who said, "Oh, architects shouldn't make their first work till they're over 40 because it's a measure of their life experience." Anyway, he made his first work when he was about 22, so he didn't follow that precept. But when you're young,
yeah,
you take risks, and that's a time when sometimes you might do your most exciting and maybe your most foolish work, because you don't have that measure of experience as to how things really work over time. And we have just rebuilt. When I say we, my builder friends and I, and the lovely woman who bought my first house ever. In 1963, it was built when I was 22 years of age and a student. And she has bought it after 3 or 4 owners had trashed it. But she saw inside of it and she said, I'm going to fix that house. So we did it together. And I changed things in it because when I did it, I didn't understand about the theater of approach. You know, that you just don't go straight in a door. You actually go up a certain way and you come out onto a platform and then you behold everything. You know, I learned that from Japan. I didn't know it before. So you find that as you get older, you see things in a more simple way, I think, and so your work should become less complicated. I think that's happened with me. It's not as adventurous, but that house in the film that you saw progressively filmed with the rammed earth wall and the client who very wisely kept a whole lot of money back and didn't tell me. And that's a measure of a lot of life experience. And I think that house works beautifully, I think. Very different from the first work. And each of the works is different because the place was different and the people are different. So how do you keep your edge? Well, that's something I'm not sure about that. I'm really not sure, but I think it's a question of love, actually. How do you keep your love and your passion for something? And if you keep that alive, then the work stays alive, something like that.
Right.
Nice question.
Okay. Yeah, it was a great question. Imran, I think we are kind of running out of time. So
Okay,
we'll
okay, sure.
end with one last question from Meghna. And then, yeah, we'll finish it here for today. Maybe we'll continue another day, Richard, if you give us some time.
I'd love to come and see you in Dhaka and that beautiful. But let's go to the mangroves.
We should do that next time. You have to come. We'll do that. Next time you're here, we'll go to the mangroves.
And I might see Bug in the striped light.
Absolutely. We'll make that happen. Don't worry.
Wouldn't that be something? I'd love to go there.
Meghna. Meghna, we cannot hear you.
Yeah. I can.
So I would like not here.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I can only see me.
Yeah, we don't see you.
Can you hear me now?
Here, my love. I've somehow mucked something up here. I can only see me. I can see.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we do, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I would like to end. Hello.
Meghna, to wait, Coral.
Okay.
And also, we can't see you.
Whoever's speaking will come into the green light.
Okay. Yep. Thanks, Sarah. Fantastic.
Meghna, tomar video to on.
I'm connecting through my phone. So, can you see me now?
No.
No, we can't see you.
Okay, I can see me. I don't know where it went.
Anyway, to me, you can ask the question.
Okay, I would like to ask a very simple question. Like, whenever we visited your house or we saw in the film yesterday, like your architecture is all about very simple and crafty things, and at the same time they have certain ambiguity and mystery, and somehow they ignite some thoughts. Like they are not very much simple. Like we cannot read it at the very first sight. And my question would be a very simple question, which is, what is your thought on the beauty of architecture? How do you find beauty in architecture, or how do you wander around the question of beauty?
Still don't quite understand what you're asking me. Sorry.
Yeah. So I think
No, it's only because I'm having trouble understanding. That's all.
Right. Well, I think what her question is about beauty. So what is your understanding of beauty in architecture?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I don't know how to answer it, I really don't know how to answer it.
It's the most difficult question, I guess.
Well, but look, Look, I mean, this cup,
Yes.
this cup in my mind is almost perfect. So how does one recognize that? Well, you recognize it, one, your eye. How do you develop the right eye for things? I think Marina would probably answer that question better than I, but I think my eye has developed through nature, basically, and curiosity, being curious about things and looking at things and asking why they are what they are. How do they work? How do you make a mousetrap from a flat sheet of tin in an African market that works brilliantly? So you get that mousetrap and you look at it, then you do a drawing of it and you work it all out how it actually works. How does the loom work that they make their beautiful sheshers? How does that loom work? And the body puts the tension on the threads. I think a sense of beauty and a keenness of eye comes from a curiosity like that. And sometimes things are really puzzling to you because you can't see why they work like they do, and yet they do. And again, some aeroplanes are like that. If you look at some of these bombers, these aeroplanes which are made to evade radar, you look at them and they look like some sort of a sea creature. And you look at them and they work. And you ask yourself the question, are they beautiful or are they not? I think it's a lot to do with the purpose. If the purpose isn't right and ethical, I think they have some problems, although they're really interesting to study. For example, as an architect, if someone asked any of us to design a jail that makes people incarcerated and keeps them out of society, can that be a work of architecture? Yes or no? Perhaps
No.
if you...
No.
Where's that coming from? I can't see where. Can it be a work of architecture? Maybe if you question the whole issue of rehabilitation and how that can work for society, then you can make a good place as an architect for that sort of purpose. But if it's a place that's set up for punishment, then I don't think you can. And yet, in our city, we have an old jail made of stone, which was the most feared place in the city back in colonial days. And now it is the local art school. And it is beautiful as an art school. And the only difference is the door is open. So I don't know what to think. I'm sure you all have ideas about that. It would make a nice workshop to think about that, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
The door is open. The door is unlocked, and it's magnificent to walk inside. That's crazy, isn't it?
So the purpose can change.
Yeah, the purpose can change, but what do you do initially?
Right.
I don't know. It'd be lovely to carry that conversation on with you.
That's really interesting. Very intriguing. Yeah. So Richard, I think we should bring it to an end, because we've been talking for a while. We've really kept you going for almost 2 hours. Yeah, really wonderful, absolutely fascinating.
It's just so nice to be in Dhaka with you.
Yeah, and you can imagine you are quite popular here, and people have so many questions and so many things to learn from you. You have to come back. There is no.
I'll have some questions also there.
Yes.
So let's go to the mangroves and find Bag.
We do that. We do that.
Yeah.
Once we've done with this pandemic and the lockdowns are over, let's make a plan and we bring you here. We go to the Sundarbans, and that part of Bangladesh you must see.
Yeah. And how can we clean the Ganges?
Absolutely.
How
the
can
Ganges.
we clean the Ganges?
Sure.
What a question that is, and how important that is.
Yes. Great. Well, thank you so much, Richard. It was absolutely wonderful and engaging. And the film is, I think it does really justice to you and your. I had a lot of questions, maybe later on, some other day. I really wanted to ask you about the explicit and the implicit that you talk about, but maybe some other time.
Well, that would be wonderful, Marina. And
we should continue.
Collectively, our family here and Stutch and all our out of work architectural professors all send their best wishes to you. And love and best wishes to you there in Bangladesh.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And good night. Good night, Richard. And thank you all for being here today. And we should continue with many more events like this. So yeah, let's keep this going, and let's remember the beautiful words of Richard, and make some make it an inspiration to go on in the next days. Thank you all. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
We have more programs coming in this month, so please watch out for our announcement. Thank you.
Okay. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye, Richard.
Bye. Bye, Richard. Bye. Thank you.
But not too carefully. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Do I just close it off, Aaron?
There is something called leave. You have on the corner. There is a yeah.
Put your face in there and show.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
He's much smarter than I am.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Smart dad, smart son. Okay, সবাইকে ধন্যবাদ. Thank you all.
সবাইকে ধন্যবাদ এবং আরকাবের টিমকে ধন্যবাদ যারা কাজ করেছে এখানকার আজকের প্রোগ্রামে গত 2 দিনের। আমরা শেষ করছি, আমি এন্ড করে দিলেই সবাই চলে যাবেন। ধন্যবাদ।
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.